saw it happen. I was right there on the bridge of the Hegman's glory, tucked away behind a cooling vent, trying to stay invisible. And let me tell you, the way they looked at each other, it wasn't hate. It was something far more confusing. We start at the end, or what should have been the end. The Kronos lock array was fully engaged. The entire sector was supposed to be painted in absolute stillness, a masterpiece of frozen time. High fabricator Zant was trembling, actually shaking, sweat beading on his pale forehead as he watched the monitor. And right there, in the middle of the bridge, stood the human captain. She wasn't frozen. She was barely even slowed down. She was close to him, too close. I remember the way she reached out, her fingers rough and calloused against the sleek, polished obsidian of Zant's console. The air between them crackled, smelling of ozone and terrified pheromones. She didn't strike him. She just leaned in, invading his personal space with a casual intimacy that felt obscene given the circumstances. I saw her brown, tired, bloodshot eyes lock onto his. She reached up, and for a second, I thought she was going to caress his cheek. Instead, she gently, almost tenderly, tapped the glass of his precious time-stop gauge. Tap, tap. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Zant flinched, his breath hitching. Not paralyzed by the machine, but by the sheer impossibility of her warmth radiating against his cold suit. To understand why that touch shattered him, you have to understand the arrogance that built the moment. Rewind a few hours. The mood on the ship was electric. Warlord Krell strutted around the deck, boasting about the investment. Trillions of credits. The Zolophian hegemon had bankrupted 3 star systems just to build the array. The theory was perfect. Physics is a law for the galaxy, right? You flip the switch, time stops, you win. Simple. Zant had tested it on 53 species. 53. Every single one of them froze like statues. I remember Vex, the poor junior engineer, trying to warn them. He huddled over a data pad in the corner, looking sick. He kept muttering about cellular chaos and high-gravity adaptation. But nobody listened to the guy in the greased tunic. They were too busy polishing their metals. When the Indomitable dropped out of warp, it looked like a joke. A rust bucket human freighter leaking radiation and held together by what looked like duct tape and prayers. CRA laughed. Actually laughed. He gave the order to fire the array like he was ordering dinner. The beam hit. The universe held its breath. The stars outside stopped twinkling. The hum of the engines died down to a low, painful throb. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Perfection. Or so we thought. I watched Vex at his station. He was checking the bioscans, and I saw the color drain from his face. He looked up at the main screen, his eyes wide, pleading with reality to make sense. Because on the screen, the humans weren't freezing. They were moving. It felt like the air had turned into clear syrup. That's the only way I can describe it. The Kronos lock was humming. That deep, bone-rattling vibration that was supposed to signal the end of the battle. But the silence never came. I watched the screen, mesmerized. The human ship hadn't stopped. It was just buffering, moving at maybe 80% speed, dragging their limbs through the stasis field like they were wading through a heavy tide. And they looked annoyed. Not scared. Annoyed. Krell was screaming. Actually screaming at Vex. He wanted to know why the most expensive weapon in history was being treated like a bad internet connection. Vex's poor soul frantically scrolled through the bioscans, his face illuminated by the red distress lights. "It's their cells, sir," Vex whispered. I barely heard him over the alarms. "They're vibrating. Look at the metabolic rates. They come from a death world. Their biology is in a constant state of panic and repair. They adapt to stress faster than the field can lock them down." I saw realization hit Krell. He understood that you can't freeze something that refuses to sit still. Then the airlock hissed open. They didn't storm the bridge with blasters. They just walked in. The captain, the woman I told you about, the one with the tired eyes, walked right up to the main console. She moved with a strange, fluid grace, fighting the resistance of the time field. With every step, I remember the sound of her boots on the deck. Thud, thud. Heavy, real, undeniable. She stopped in front of Zant. This brings us back to that moment I saw from the vent. The moment of contact. Zant was paralyzed by the failure of his life's work. He looked small inside his ceremonial armor. The human captain sighed a long, ragged exhalation that fogged up the pristine surface of Zant's display. She held a mug in one hand. I could smell it from where I was hiding. Burnt beans, sugar, and something chemical. Caffeine. "You guys have a really heavy draft in here," she said. Her voice was scratchy human. It's messing with our navigation. She reached out that moment I described earlier. She didn't hit him. She placed her hand on his shoulder. I saw Zant stiffen, his eyes going wide. The heat from her hand must have been shocking against his cool suit. It was a gesture of pity. Pure, condescending pity. Nice tech though, she murmured, leaning in close. A bit buggy. We'll take it off your hands. She tapped his console. Tap, tap. I watched as her engineer, a lanky human with grease in his hair, simply plugged a drive into the port. They didn't just steal the weapon, they downloaded the source code while Zant stood there, frozen by his own inadequacy. The humans left the way they came, fighting the lag, complaining about the headache the field was giving them. When the Indomitable jumped to warp, the backlash shattered the array. The aftermath was quiet. Krell was ruined. Of course, the hegemony couldn't recover the cost. But I still think about Zant. I saw him days later sitting in the mesh hall, staring at his hands. He wasn't the same. He had looked into the face of chaos, and chaos had patted him on the shoulder and offered him a pitying smile. Last I heard, the humans patented a scaled-down version of the tech. They don't use it for war. They sell it as a snooze button for parents who need 5 minutes of quiet. Zant is working in scrap reclamation now. But sometimes, when the shift ends, I see him looking up at the stars, wondering how a species that runs on anxiety and being water managed to outrun time itself. Truth is, I think we all learned something that day. Perfection is fragile, but chaos is forever. Please follow my channel for more videos. One click from you can change my life.